All right. Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Thursday morning, August the 15th, 2023. We are continuing in the book of Revelation. And just want to remind everyone, be sure that if House of New Beginnings is a blessing to you, if you would hit like and share and subscribe and give, and just continue to pour into. All right, hey, oh, there I am. Sorry. Morning. And continue to invest and partner with us in making the love of God known, the Word of God known, available to in an ever expanding way to a hurting and broken world. So continuing in Revelation, Revelation 21:3. We're going to look this morning. We're going to spend a lot of time in this one passage, and we're going to be looking at a lot of cross references this morning, a lot of passages throughout the scripture, just pointing to the reality. The title today is The Tabernacle on the Other Side of the Wilderness. Pointing to the reality that this is ultimately the heart of God. The heart of God to have that we would be with Him. The heart of God that to be in relationship with His people, that He made us to walk in the garden with Him. He made us to be with Him. And when we fell short, when we had made a choice that set us on the path of death and destruction, that the Lord Himself put in motion, set in place a plan to restore us, to redeem us, to bring us into right relationship with Him, and to make all things new. This has always been His desire, and we see that throughout Scripture. That is the heart of God, that we would be like Him, and we would know Him and walk with Him. The Lord had declared through the prophet Isaiah in Isaiah 65, verse 17 says, because He says, "Behold, look, I'm creating a new heavens and a new earth. The former things will not be remembered or come to mind. But be glad and rejoice forever in what I am creating. For behold, I'm creating Jerusalem for rejoicing, and her people for joy. Then I will rejoice in Jerusalem and be glad in my people. No longer will the voice of weeping or the voice of crying be heard in her." And so what you see, even in that passage, right, he's given us imagery of the place where He has put His name, Jerusalem, that there is a restoration, and it will be a place of rejoicing for His people. And look at verse 19 again. "Then I will rejoice in Jerusalem and rejoice in my people." That there is this restoration that brings joy. And so we've seen this imagery of the bride and the groom, of the Lord being the groom, of His people being the bride. And we see that again in Revelation 21, the fulfillment of what He's promised. "Then I saw a new heaven," verse 1, "and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. I also saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband." Right? And again, the name New Jerusalem, which had appeared earlier in the book of Revelation, the promise from the resurrected Yeshua to the one who overcomes. Remember Revelation 3:12, the one who overcomes, I will make that one a pillar in the temple of my God, and he will never leave it. And on him I will write the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God, and from my own new name. Right? So the imagery here again reminds us of what we had seen in chapter 19, the marriage supper of the Lamb. Revelation 19:7-8, "Let us rejoice and be glad and give glory to him, for the wedding of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. She was given fine linen to wear, bright and clean, for the fine linen is the righteous deeds of the Kedoshim, of the saints. So there the bride are the people of God, adorned with in righteousness with their righteous deeds, the bright pure linen which the Lord himself has provided. He has given us bright clean linen to wear, and we have prepared ourselves with it. You look at Isaiah 61:10, which we looked at this in our last time together in Revelation. I will rejoice greatly in Adonai. Like, this is the ones who have received what the Anointed One has done. My soul will be joyful in my God, for he has clothed me in garments of salvation. He has wrapped me in a robe of righteousness, like a bridegroom wearing a priestly turban, like a bride adorning herself with her jewels. So now, though, in Revelation 21, the bride is a city. The New Jerusalem is called the bride. And so the question then, the bride, is that the people of God, the city of God, right? Because here the holy city, the sparkling holy city is the bride of the Lamb. But you really do get the sense, the idea that in another sense, we, his people, are the city. We will be pillars of the temple. Which we'll see more of that in this chapter. Because the place of God's dwelling has been described as his people. Remember, it's worthwhile to recall that back in Revelation 13, it's talking about the beast. And it said this in verse 6. It said, "Then he, the beast, opened his mouth with blasphemies against God, to slander his name and his tabernacle." To slander his tabernacle, to slander the word is skinin, which we're going to look at today. That's his tent, his tabernacle. And he further defines that. That is those dwelling in heaven. Right? So the tabernacle speaks to his people. So now here, the city, New Jerusalem, is descending like a bride coming down the aisle. Yeah. And the bridal city becomes the home, the dwelling place, of God with humanity. Verse 3. I also heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold, look, the dwelling of God is among men, and he shall tabernacle among them. They shall be his people, and God himself shall be among them and be their God." So it opens up saying, I heard a loud voice from the throne saying. So throughout Revelation, you had these loud voices, unnamed voices coming. You had them coming from the midst of the four living creatures, coming from heaven, coming from the heavenly temple, coming from the throne. And a loud voice making important announcements, right? And Revelation 11:12. Then just a few of these. Then they heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, the two witnesses, "Come up here." And they went up to heaven in a cloud while their enemies watched. An important loud voice calling us up. Revelation 12:10. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, "Now," this announcement, "now have come the salvation, the power, and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of his Mashiach, of his anointed one. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters, the one who accuses them before our God day and night, has been thrown out." We saw at the end of Revelation 16, verse 17, the seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air. A loud voice came out of the temple and from the throne saying, "It is done." And so here there's this announcement again, coming from the throne. Now you say, well, if it's coming from the throne, is this the voice of the Lord? It's coming from the throne, coming from the throne room. It's probably not the voice of the Lord. And the reason I would say that is because in these verses 3 and 4, it speaks of God in the third person, right? He shall tabernacle among them. And then in verse 5, the Lord speaks in the first person, "Behold, I am making all things new." So you get the sense that this is a from the throne room, from the throne. This is a declaration. The words of this announcement, though, are not new to us. They're very familiar it's very familiar language to us, and that's what we're going to see today. As the city descends, coming down the aisle, as it were, the voice from the throne proclaims, "Behold, the dwelling of God," the skini is the Greek word of God, "is among men," is with men, with humanity, it says. "And he shall, skinose, he shall dwell," tabernacle, "with them. They shall be his people," or his peoples, "and God himself shall be among them and be their God." So this loud voice says, "Behold," right? Attention, look. God's dwelling, his skini, is with humanity, it says. So this is this return to what we had in the garden. It's a return to direct communion with God. What we had with him prior to our having to hide from God, prior to our having been expelled from the garden in Genesis 3. And yet that what we have, it's a return to that, and yet so much more. And the language is familiar to us because this has been the trajectory that the Lord has been moving us since the day that we were expelled, the trajectory to which he has been moving us all along. So he called Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, told Abraham that your descendants will be enslaved for 430 years. Told him in Genesis 15. And so then, and the Lord remembered his promise to Abraham. He says, "But I'm going to bring them out, and I'm going to bring them to back to this place. I'm going to bring them to the promised land." So when the Lord came through Moses, spoke through Moses, and when our ancestors, the descendants of Abraham, were enslaved, the Lord sent this message, Exodus 6, very familiar language to us from every Passover. "Therefore say to the children of Israel, I am Adonai, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will deliver you from their bondage, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments." Verse 7, "I will take you to myself as a people, and I will be your God. You will know that I am Adonai, your God, who brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. So I will bring you into the land that I swore to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give it to you as an inheritance. I am Adonai." Right. So there's this promise, and the what we end up seeing is, while this is all a very literal, out of Egypt, out of bondage, through the wilderness into the land, that it is at the same time we come to understand as we read through the scriptures, and the writer of Hebrews makes this really clear, that he's the salvation out of sin, out of bondage, out of slavery is what the Lord has done. But he says you have to continue through the wilderness. He's bringing us to that promised land. He says, now, if the thing that he was talking about, when you read in Psalm 110, he says if what he was talking about, or excuse me, Psalm 95, was the place Joshua ended up leading us into, if that was the place of our rest, then the psalmist, the prophet, wouldn't have talked about a future rest. Ultimately, this was pointing to what we're looking at here in Revelation. We're looking at the ultimate hope, right? And so initially when Moses came, we see in verse 9, at that point, he spoke to the children of Israel this way, but they did not listen to him because of their broken spirit and cruel bondage. Right? The Lord redeemed them just as he said he would, And then he gave instructions. He's like, okay, now I will be your God. I will be in your midst, right? So he gives instructions to make a sanctuary, that he will dwell among us in the wilderness. So in Exodus 25, we read in verses 8 and 9, he tells Moses, have them make a sanctuary for me so that I may dwell among them. You are to make it all precisely according to everything that I show you, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of the furnishings within. Just so you must make it. He continues in verse 22, I will meet you there. I will speak with you from above the atonement cover, from between the two cherubim that are on the ark of the testimony, and about all that I will command you for the children of Israel. So here in Revelation, we see this word used, skini, which that's where we get our word for skin. It's for a tent, right? And so that's the language that God used. That's used in Hebrew. It was the word ohel for tent, or mishkan for tabernacle. And when the Greek translators, when the rabbis translated the Bible into Greek, they used the word skini, which is what we see here. In Exodus 33, verse 7, it says, now Moses used to take the skini, the tent, the tabernacle, and pitch it outside the camp, far off from the camp. And he called it the tent of meeting, or the tent of witness. Skinin marturio, the tent of witness. So it happened, everyone who sought Adonai would go to the tent of meeting, which was outside the camp. Whenever Moses went out to the tent, all the people would arise and stand, everyone at the door of his own tent, and look after Moses until he'd gone into the tent. After Moses entered, the pillar of cloud descended, stood at the door, and he would speak with Moses. When all the people saw the pillar of the cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, they all rose up and worshipped, every man at the entrance of his own tent. So Adonai spoke with Moses face to face, as a man speaks with his friend. Then he would return to the camp, but his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, did not leave the tent. So here God was with them. God had given us a place, a tabernacle, that he would be in our midst. However, Israel walked in disobedience to the Lord, as we talked about this past Shabbat. Because of ongoing rebellion, eventually we have the exile, and in Ezekiel we see his presence depart from the place where he had put his name, from the temple in Jerusalem. Ezekiel 10:18. Then the glory of Adonai went forth, departed from above the threshold of the house, and stood above the cherubim. Yeah, he departed from the temple of stones and mortar, but still in Babylon, in exile. Remember, he was the sanctuary. He said, I will be your sanctuary. Look at Ezekiel 11 again. Verse 16, I don't know why, I think I just put 17 in there, but can you add 16? It's kind of the key passage. Verse 16 says, therefore say, thus says Adonai Elohim, the Lord our God, though I removed them far away among the nations, though I scattered them among the countries, yet for a little while, or during this short time, I will be, or I am, or I was a sanctuary for them in the countries where they have gone. And therefore, thus says Adonai Elohim, I will gather you from the peoples and collect you out of the countries where you've been scattered, and I will give you the land of Israel. When they come there, they will remove all of its detestable things, all of its abominations. Then I will give them one heart, and I will put a new spirit within them. I will remove the heart of stone from their flesh and give them a heart of flesh, so that they may follow my ways, keep my ordinances, and practice them. They will be my people, and I will be their God. So this is the picture that he gave Ezekiel, right? So then later in Ezekiel, you have the vision of the valley of the dry bones, where the Lord brings Ezekiel to this valley full of dead men's bones, hopeless dead bones, and he breathes life into them. And you even see their newness come to life, and you see language that's used there similar to when the Lord says, come up here. And so then he says this to those that he has brought from being dead bones to life. Ezekiel 37:13 says, you will know that I am Adonai when I have opened your graves and brought you up out of your graves, my people. I will put my spirit in you, and you will know, and you will live. I will place you in your own land, and you will know that I, Adonai, have spoken, that I have done it, declares the Lord. Continues, look at verse 21 in Ezekiel 37. Then say to them, thus says Adonai, behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the nations where they have gone. I will gather them from every side and bring them into their own land. I will make them one nation in the land on the mountains of Israel, and one king will be king to them all. They will no longer be two nations and never again be divided into two kingdoms. They will never again be defiled with their idols, their detestable things, or with any of their transgressions. I will save them out of all their dwellings in which they sinned. I will purify them. Then they will be my people, and I will be their God. My servant David will be king over them. They will all have one shepherd. And they will walk in my ordinances and observe my rulings and do them. They will live in the land that I gave to my servant Jacob, where your ancestors lived. They will live there, they, their children, their children's children, forever. And my servant David will be their prince forever. I will cut a covenant of shalom with them. It will be an everlasting covenant with them. I will give to them and multiply them. I will set up my sanctuary among them forever. My dwelling place will be over them. I will be their God, and they will be my people. Then the nations will know that I am Adonai, who sanctifies Israel, when my sanctuary is in their midst forever. So then after that, when you go beyond there, in Ezekiel, you see the battles, the wars, Gog and Magog, and so forth. And then over the period of from chapters 40 to 47 the temple is described. And so when you read all this, initially the idea would have been, when we come out of Babylon, when we come out of exile, this would be the temple. So the temple that was then constructed, that was standing when Yeshua walked the earth, right? That temple was what would have been in their minds and in the minds of those who were in that temple. This is the temple of which Ezekiel spoke. However, when you look at this passage, it says, I will set up my sanctuary among them forever. Right? That temple, all we have left is a wall. That's not the temple. Either the Lord was speaking of something else, or people can say, well, then the prophets are discounted. But the Lord was speaking of something beyond a temple of brick and mortar, of stones and mortar. The imagery described in Ezekiel is something that is beyond this sort of physical thing that we see, where we end up seeing the water coming out of the throne room of the temple that goes to ankle high and knee, waist. Then I'm swimming, and on either side of the river are trees, and their fruit is in season, and it's for healing and life. Their fruit and their leaves bring healing and life. And the waters that they flow to, the Dead Sea that was the nothing can live in, is now is healed and teeming with life. Right? This is pointing to something that is beyond what we see in the building of the second temple. And then so you have this imagery in Ezekiel of a temple, and it's giving parameters, physical parameters and measurements. And here this city is called, we're pillars. Remember, the one who overcomes will be a pillar in the temple of my God. But you get to the end of Revelation, just jump ahead to verse 22 at the end of this chapter, it says, I saw no temple in her, for its temple is Adonai Elohei Tzavot and the Lamb. And we're pillars in that temple. So there's a unity. This is something more than a physical structure. This is something that is almost beyond our comprehension. We're being given imagery of, again, we talked about the other, last time, talking about how the imagery of the city that is described using things that we value. But it's made really of the bride of what the Lord values, which is his people. So Ezekiel had given all of these prophecies, and And then on the other side of the Babylonian exile, so then exile was over, the Lord prophesied through the prophet Zechariah. He said this, Zechariah 2, verse 14, "Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for behold, I am coming, and I will live, I will dwell, I will shechan," which is the tabernacle, mishkan, "among you, declares Adonai. In that day, many nations will join themselves to Adonai, and they will be my people, and I will dwell among you. And then you will know that Adonai Tzevot has sent me to you." Later in Zechariah chapter 8, verse 6, it says, "Thus says Adonai Tzevot, it may seem extraordinary, miraculous, difficult in the eyes of the remnant of this people. This, what I'm describing here, may seem impossible for you to grasp in those days, but it will also be extraordinary in my eyes, declares the Lord. Thus says Adonai Tzevot, look, behold, I will save Moshiach, I will rescue, I will save, I will deliver my people from the land of the east and from the land of the west. I will bring them back, and they will live in the midst of Jerusalem. They will be my people, and I will be their God in truth and in righteousness." And so now, here in Revelation 21:3, we see the dwelling of God with man in a way that is most palpable, since we saw God himself come in the flesh, right? In John 1:14, "And the Word became flesh and tabernacled," skinosen, he tabernacles, dwelt among us, and we have looked upon his glory, the glory of the one and only from the Father, full of grace and truth. When we talk about the tabernacle, we talk about the dwelling of God. The writer of Hebrews painted a picture of heaven as the Holy of Holies, as the most holy place. Again, that even what was given to Moses to do was he said, do it just so. In Hebrews chapter 8, this is the main point being said, verse 1, we do have such a high priest who has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens. Verse 2, "He is a priestly attendant of the holies and the true skini, the true tent which Adonai set up, not man." So this is, he says, verse 5 says, talking about the current priesthood, the Levitical high priests offering the sacrifices according to the Torah, they're serving in a replica. He says they offer service in a replica, in a foreshadower of the heavenlies, one that is just as Moses was instructed by God when he was about to complete the tabernacle. For he says, "See that you make everything according to the design that was shown you on the mountain." And then the writer of Hebrews continues, and he quotes from Jeremiah 31. Continues making this point. He quotes from Jeremiah 31 saying, "This is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel in those days, says Adonai. I will put my instructions, my Torah, into their mind and upon their hearts, and I will write it, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people." So now at the end of Revelation, the Lord comes again to his people. Redeemed, right? Now they're redeemed. He comes to the congregations in Revelation, and they're still in this wilderness. They're still facing suffering, experiencing cruelty in the midst of a broken world system. And he reminds them, listen, I'm with you, right? At the beginning of Revelation 1, the Lord gives this image of the 7 menorahs, the 7 candlesticks, and each of those were representative of the congregations, and he is in the midst of them, and they're in his hand. I'm with you. I'm in your midst. You're in my hand. But now there's this clarity about what will be, right? This promise from God, and that he is fulfilling what he said. He is tabernacling with us. That there is we're still in the wilderness, and we dwell in him. During this time when we are scattered, he's a sanctuary to us. He is our dwelling place, and we are his dwelling place. We are his temple, and so that is our hope through this time, and that's where the writer of Hebrews says, you've got to continue in faith. You've got to continue trusting. Don't be discouraged. He says in Hebrews chapter 2, he says, don't begin to drift away. In Hebrews chapter 6, he says, don't begin to stand away. Using the word apostasy, don't begin to stand away from trusting in the Lord. Because in Hebrews chapter 10, if you turn away, it becomes, after having tasted the reality, it becomes nearly impossible to return. So persevere, hang on. And so to us and to those that continue through what feels like a lengthy desert, like a lengthy wilderness, his tabernacle is still in our midst. He dwells in us and we in him, but he points to us the ultimate reality that is coming, that what he has always promised will be fulfilled in a way that is complete. So, in our society, if you're engaged, in America, if someone is engaged to be married, you're like, well, they're not married yet. So some people, some guys, I remember there'd be guys that'd be like, she's still on the market till it's done. That's not the way. That's not the way it was. The way that it was when you were betrothed to be married. You were as good as married, except you didn't have the fullness of intimacy that would only be on the other side of marriage. And so it was but there was an assurance that the groom was coming. And then there would be fullness. But he is your groom and you are his bride. And that's spoken of with trust and with hope and with assurance. But the fullness of that is only on the other side of the wedding, right? So now there's been the wedding. This is the bride. This is the wedding of the Lamb. Now that which we've been waiting for, on the other side, there is the fullness of intimacy with the Lord in a way that we've had a foretaste of, but which will be complete, right? That he will be it is the place that he prepares for us, which is himself, and we are his, adorned. It is the real tabernacle on the other side of the wilderness that we look to, that we hold to, that is this relationship that we have with God. So I'm gonna pause for today. We'll finish. Probably I'm gonna continue a little bit longer in verse 3 tomorrow, and then we'll roll into verse 4. Again, sorry for that. We're kind of trotting through these verses, but there's so much that that it's so valuable to stop and to see the threads of God's promise coming to fulfillment at the end, and to remember he's been saying, hang on, I'm coming, hang on, I'm coming, hang on, I'm coming, hang on, I'm coming. And he continues to say, hang on, I'm coming. Right? We're the betrothed, and he wants his bride to include all humanity, that all would come to him, and he gives every opportunity for that. All right, well, we'll pick back up tomorrow here. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a beautiful day.